Vyomavad-vyapta-dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om Tat Sat. So we were discussing what are the outcomes of serious meditation and sadhana in the third section, which is Anavopaya of the Shiva Sutras. So the two key sutras that we had done were Siddha Swatantra Bhavaha. What is that state of being a Siddha? And we had also discussed it earlier. What is that Siddhi? Which is Sattvic Abhina, where you are passing through life, but you have this clear understanding about the distinctness of who you are, your real nature, vis-a-vis all that you participate in, all that you associate with in the course of your life. And then he had also mentioned the next verse, Yatha Tatra Tatha Anyatra. So it's an expansion and an extension of one's meditative state into things which are around him. So, Esha Swatantra Bhava Asya Yoginaha Yatra Dehe Yoginaha Swa Abhivakti Yata Tatra Yatha. The way he sort of, there's a integral consciousness, this perfect unity within the domain of one's individual consciousness. But remember that this particular person is ultimately not still stuck with what we discussed earlier is Atma Vyapti, but he has now expanded and he has evolved and he has ascended to a much higher plane of Shiva Vyapti, where there is no more any awareness of the distinctiveness of him as an individual unit of consciousness. He is no more thinking of himself as an individual, because as an individual, much of the literature hints at that truth, that as an individual there is nothing called liberation. When we are able to move out of this understanding about our limited expression as an individual, this particular domain expression, if I can call it, when we transcend it, overcome it, then we graduate, we expand, and we become one with the absolute divine. That is liberation. That only is perfect enlightenment. Therefore, this particular sutra is only restating what we have all through been talking about in Vedanta and in the Kashmiri Saivism. Yatha tatra tatha anyatra. So because he's no more stuck with his individual restricted consciousness, tatha anyatra sarvatra sada avahitasya sabhavati. Because sada avahita, he is, again, these are all interlinked, because the next sutra is going to deal with this whole idea about avadhana or concentration, or how to sort of remain focused in your sadhana. Therefore, he's saying sada avahitasya. So he's without any interruption. When a person is steadfastly established in that supreme consciousness, whatever he's doing, sa bhavati, this particular thing happens. Yathoktam swachande, swachanda tantra mein, swachanda seva swachandaha swachando vicharet tada. And that we had sort of touched upon this, that you see, the awareness of the self, or the Atma Jnana, has no beginning. This is Swata Siddha. There's nothing to be achieved. It's only to be recognized. It's only to return to, which is our Swarupa. Therefore, when he's saying Swachanda, Chaiva Swachandaha Swachando Vicharetata, he was always having that Swatantrata, that sovereignty, that freedom from shackles in all ways, in all senses. He was always there. That Atma Jnana, that Swarupa, our Swarupa as such, was never restricted by our thoughts, our actions. What are the circumstances in which we may get constrained, we may be trapped? These are appearances, that is not our Swarupa. Vicharet tada. And then in the Spandakarika also, si spandepi labhate tat prayatnena. And this particular state is achieved through a lot of vichara, lot of examination, because we have to graduate to a very higher level of consciousness. Tat prayatnena, so with a lot of effort, parikhyam, and therefore that parikhyam means parikhyam. You should, like for example, the strotabhya, mantabhya, and nidhyasitabhya. Veda says similarly here. He's saying parikhyam. That means parikya. All the time. This is something that should be examined. Parikhyam tattvamadarat. So this particular swarupa, when we do it all the time, that is achieved. Yataha swatantrata tasya sarvatra iyam akritima. This particular swarupa is not something which is made out, which is produced, which is achieved. Like for example, the vikaras which are there, apya, vikarya, sanskarya. No, no, not any of these things which you have with all artifacts. So either there's a modification, something you have got, something you have purified, anything you have done something with an external object. Clay becomes a pot, gold becomes a golden necklace. A little young boy who comes to the school, after some time he graduates with a very advanced degree, the university turns him out into a scientist. All these are transformative activities. In Swarupa, there is no transformation, there is nothing to be achieved. The Swarupa has to be recognized, understood, and internalized. And when that happens, then only this fellow can also extend it. He's become perfectly inside out, and therefore, wherever he goes, he carries that consciousness. And that purity, the power of his consciousness, also affects everything around him. So that is what we have already discussed, and we have also sort of looked at the commentary. So I'm not revisiting it. The 15th sutra of this third section is, now you might ask this question. So he's perfect. Shiva Sutra should come to an end here. There is no need to go further. Before we move further, it's important for me to sort of remind ourselves. I'm just trying to not remind you, but remind myself as well. What was the last sutra of the second chapter? Before we were about to close the chapter, there was a warning given to us by the Shastrakara. And what was that warning? Vidya Sanghare Tadutha Swapna Darsanam. You're doing all this sadhana, Saktopaya, very good. You will go to a very high plane, and then you will be Atmastha. You will go to the Sambhovapaya. You will have that Bhairavapatti. All these things will happen. But then he clarifies and he warns. Vidya Sanghare Tadutta Swapna Darsanam. The moment Tadeva Satya Vidyayaha Sangharaha Tena King Bhavet. But if there is a termination of your sadhana, because Saktopaya you're successful, so what? There's a long way to go. You are not yet there. You have not established yourself in Shiva Tattva. So again and again, in order to encourage the sadhaka, the Shastrakar would say that once you are there, then there is no problem. Like, for example, I keep giving this example. There is no justification as to why a little boy should learn the alphabets, because alphabets will not give him any wisdom. But then mom entices the little son by asking him, what do you want to be when you grow up? Most likely will say, I want to be like Papa, I want to be like Uncle, I want to be like Mama, whosoever is most attractive or in a powerful position in the house. And what is the father doing? The father is an engineer, he's a professor, whatever. Oh, you want to be an engineer, or you want to be a lawyer? Okay. So you have to do this. You said you want to be like your Papa, so this is what you have to do. So he learns the alphabets. So he asks the mother, so if I learn these alphabets, I would be a lawyer. No, yes, you would be a lawyer. But the moment the alphabets learning is over, then there'll be arithmetic. There'll be so many other things which will come in his way. And he'll slowly, gradually understand it's a long journey. Similarly, the the precepts, the advisors, the spiritual counselors, the self-realized gurus, they all the time keep in mind the mental dimness, the emotional insecurities of the aspirant who is entering into this path. Therefore, abruptly at different points, they'll make a lot of big statements and give a lot of assurances regarding the great benefits, and that you will finally attain that Shivahood and you will get perfect liberation, enlightenment. You shall never ever be touched by any problems. But then slowly they will alert you, like at the end of this chapter in this Saktopaya, Sutra number 10th was Vidya Sanghare. If there is Vidya Sanghara, there is a termination of your sadhana. Then what happens? Tadutta Swapna Darsanam. You shall slowly recoil and go back. Shuddha Vidyayaha Sanghare Nimajjane Taduttasya Kramat. Then, all that slowly, then, everything, everything that you had left behind will recall and reappear. Okay. And all this. And what is that? What is that Swapna? Bhedamayasya Vikalpa Prapancha Swarupasya. So this whole samsara, X, Y, Z, I want to achieve this, I want to do that. All these emotions and desires will return. And it's like a person takes sannyas and then he wants to study Vedanta and everything. And then after some time, somebody sort of injects into his mind some idea as to how so many things are still left to be achieved. And then he becomes an ecological activist, or he becomes a gender advocate for gender rights, or he becomes a child rights activist. And slowly, through the back door, so far it's limited to these ethical, movements of the mind. These are fine. But these vikshepa, once you're allowed, slowly, and the best thing is that if you're in a professional profiteering kind of economic engagement or any kind of activity one is doing, he wants to spiritualize that, then intelligently he sort of jumps from that profiteering kind of an engagement to more of an ethical or compassion driven engagement, because that would purify. Because from a grossly rajasic nature of his engagement, he is now ascending and graduating towards a sattvic mode of engagement with samsara. For him, it's a good achievement. But for a person who wants to have this atmic jnana and he has ascended to a higher plane, when he returns to this mode of ethical engagement for the greater good of society, he has to be all the time on the alert, because through the back door, he's anyway getting into the dangerous territory of samsara. And then he has to be all the time alert, because through the back door, the emotions, the sanskaras, the weaknesses that he has left behind could make an entry, could return. It's like once you have used this, mosquito killers and insecticide spray, you have already given it. Your house is now clean and everything, and you want to go and sleep in a small room in a guest house somewhere in Asia or in India, where you have lots of mosquitoes in temperate climates. And then what happens? He wants to go out and bring something. The moment he opens the door, he's going to bring in some fragrance because there's a beautiful garden. But if you open the garden, the fragrance of the flowers that bloom at night are going to come in. But with that, also mosquitoes. So one has to be very careful with all this. Therefore, the Shastra is very intelligently is mentioning Vidya Sanghare Tadutta Swapna Darsanam. If you are putting an end to your sadhana, remember the same Vikalpa, Prapancha Swarupatmaka Sansara, it will make a re-entry. It will come back. And slowly, one by one, all. It's like a guy who sort of had a bad friend circle. He wants to change his life. He wants to engage in some kind of self-transformative sadhana, and therefore he leaves everything. He changes his friend circle, changes his city, and goes to another place and finds a job because he wants to start a new life. And then what happens? He's going to one party of one of his relatives where one of his old friends suddenly appears there and says hello, and the whole friend circle changes him. And I say, where are you? Which city? So he's being in another city makes no difference because he has re-established his link or association with the vicious circle of friends whom he wanted to leave behind and look for, recreate in his life and orchestrate and arrange and sort of manifest a virtuous circle of relationships. That will remain a far dream because then the negative energies are going to pull him back. Similarly, he's saying Vidya Sanghare Tadutta Swapna Darsanam. I had to remind ourselves of this because the next sutra similarly is alerting us. Bijavadhanam. You must all the time concentrate, meditate on that Vija. And what is that Vija? Vija is nothing other than the Swatantra Sakti or Lord Shiva. That is the seed of this whole universe. Constantly think about what is that energy out of this? Everything happens, everything. Because the moment we withdraw our mind from this, we are exposed to the dangers of being trapped by whatever appear to be very attractive to us. It's like one of these fraud calls which comes on your phone these days very often by the scamsters. They are only trying to identify one friend that you are scared of, and one friend you are scared of, one enemy you are scared of, and one friend you want to meet. What is a temptation and what is your anxiety? They play out, they play on these two emotions, fear and temptation. Some greed, some quick benefit, whatever you want to invest, this, that, or they will play. Some weakness somebody has, okay, we know your phone, you had made these calls, you are playing these games, you are going to internet, you are doing all that, and they will trap you. It's very interesting. So the moment you say, if they say, okay, you drop this one, hey, today I got a call and he said, okay, your phone is going to be withdrawn and blah, blah, blah. There is unusual use of your phone. And he says, so I'm speaking from this cyber security. And you just smile, say, yeah. So this is superintendent of police in this district in India. What do you want to talk about? Immediately cuts the phone. So you just have to be all the time alert as to what these guys are doing because they're playing a game and they're playing with their emotions. Interestingly, these scamsters, these fraudsters are far less harmful compared to samsara. Because only if you receive a phone call can they harm you. You can cut the phone, they cannot do anything. You don't pay any attention to them, they cannot do anything. Samsara changes us, it's encircling. Actually, they are talking about a digital arrest, but we are actually in a complete life arrest in the samsara from morning to night, even in our dreams. There's no respite. You want to shut the door and switch off your phone and you go to sleep. The same vasanas and sanskaras may enter, especially in situations of PTSD or post traumatic stress disorder, in a very complex situation. Even if a person wants to sleep peacefully, these things will again emerge in his subjective world in sleep state and trouble him, continue to sort of nag him, prick him, sometimes send some good emotions, certain good energies, but trouble him, never give you any freedom or respite. And therefore, one has to be extremely careful about this samsara, what to do. What should he do to deal with this samsara? He's saying, bijavadhanam, without any respite, without any interruption, without any sense of complacence, constantly, steadfastly, we need to have our minds focused and concentrated on that supreme energy of the Supreme Lord, as a result of which this whole samsara appears in a positive or negative way based on how we are relating to it through our karmas, what is the load of karma we have. Therefore, he's explaining this. Evam cha yogina udasina bhavena na evam bhavitavyam pratyuta vijavadhanam. Never ever be udasina, don't be happy. Okay, I have read this, I have done that, and I have done that. In professional world, for example, you must have come across a very pet sentence of the managers that you are as good as your last assignment. You're professionally very good. Similarly, a cricketer, he's a great cricketer. When did he last score a century? You are a great poet. What was your last great poem? You are a great scientist. Any patents you did in last 2 years? These questions keep coming. So there's nothing called freedom, state of relaxation, nothing. Now you going to be all the time restless. Yeah, that's what samsara makes you. So, but this particular restlessness, we have to transform into attentiveness. Samsara makes us restless. Spiritual sadhana doesn't make us restless. It makes us attentive. What is restlessness in samsara in a normal life situation? We convert that restlessness into steadfast, uninterrupted attentiveness, awareness, and being aware without too many thoughts. Restlessness is about having too many thoughts. X, Y, Z, so many things are sort of, it's like if you look at a pan where you are boiling some oil, and then, it's making that noise all the time. It's a boiling pot, either water or oil or whatever. Mind is like that, with too many thoughts and so many bubbles appearing, different kinds of ideas. Here is the exact opposite. Constantly return to the source and then vijavadhanam. He's saying, na sa evam api udasinena anena bhabyam apitu kartavyam iti sesaha vijavadhanam kartavyam. That is what one should do all the time. Bijam, what is that? Vishwakaranam, spuratatma parashaktihi. What is that bija? What is that seed? That is the Lord Shiva's, that Shakti with which he creates this whole sansara, that Parasakti. Yadyuktam Sri Mrityunjaya Bhattarake in Netra Tantra, that is a very famous book. Sa yonihi sarvadevanam saktiram chapyanekadha. Sa yonihi, sa sakti yonihi. She is the mother. That is the mother cause of everything. Of what? Sarvadevanam saktinam cha api anekadha. She is the root of all these different kinds of, celestial entities and powers and their energies, everything. She is the cause of all the causes. Agni Somatmika Yonihi Tataha Sarvam Pravartate. Agni Soma, sun and moon. You have this energy, heat and cold. Agni Soma, both the words all the time sort of, this whole process is sort of being driven with an element of it's always having two sides, the static, the dynamic, right? So the Agni Somatmika Yonihi Tataha Sarvam Pravartate. Everything emerges out of that. Ityadi Tatra Parasakyatmani Vije. Where one has to meditate that Parasakyatma, that particular Vija, whose Swarupa is Parasakti. Vije Avadhanam, Bhuya Bhuyas Chitta Niveshanam. What is that Avadhanam? All the time, when we do those parade ceremonies, if you remember the physical education classes during our school days, they will make you do drills and parades and stuff like that. And what do they say? Savadhan in India. Savadhan means what? Avadhanena saha savadhana. So you have to have that attention, be alert. So savadhan is not a bad word or warning or anything. It's essentially saying, pay attention. Pay attention. That's most important. So that's what he's saying. What? Avadhanam bhuya bhuya chitta niveshanam karyam. That is what one has to do. Otherwise, what happens? He's saying, Ataeva surasvata parasaktir vijam sarvasya jagataha nimitamasti. So that is, now this is very interesting thing. The Tikakara here is saying jagataha nimitamasti. It's the nimitta karana it's mentioning. Now, interestingly, if you go to Vedanta, what happens? Ishvara is the nimitta karana, but Maya is the upadana karana, because they consider the samsara is sort of born out of this kind of, it creates, manifests out of that that Maya Shakti, and that is that Ajnana, that is the Upadana, because it's essentially a projection of that ignorance. Because the samsara is essentially delusional, this whole world is just a projection. So that is how they say that is the Upadana Karana. Here it's very interesting, it's saying that Nimittam Asti. So that Shakti Bija is the Nimitta. Why are they saying this? Because you see, here it's being used in a completely inverted way. And this calls for a little philosophical attention. See, the Paramashiva is pure awareness without name and form. When that Vimarshatmika self awareness emerges in him, can he create samsara? Without Vimarsha, without that self awareness, it's like a person is sitting. You're sitting in a railway station. It must have happened to you a couple of times that you are sitting. Must have happened. At least if you're a frequent traveler, must have happened at least once. You may have already checked in. You're holding the boarding pass, and you're maybe suddenly you open your gazette and you're responding to one of the urgent office mails, and then the door closed. Boarding doors closed. No, sorry, it's over. No, no, no. You're supposed to have reported before 20 minutes. No, but I was sitting right in front of you on the chair. So what can we do? We had said that the boarding gates will close 25 minutes before departure. We just have about 22 minutes. No, but it just closed. Oh, sorry, that's over. You cannot do anything. It happens. Similarly, exactly what is mentioning here is that once you lose that attention, then things don't happen. Similarly, that Paramashiva thing, once that Vimarsha Shakti creates that awareness, Lord Shiva, he becomes aware of himself. That self awareness is the mother, that is the Nimitta Karana. Therefore, that word is mentioning Nimittamasti. Tatra Vishwa Sambit Sakyatmani. That particular Chinmaya, that Chinmaya Shakti, that Parashakti, विश्वसंबित सत्यात्मनि विजेहे अवदानम तद विमर्शः चित्तस्य भूय भूय निवेशनम. Again and again you have to meditate on that. You have to establish your mind firmly there. Prabuddha yogina, not for all. That's not easy for the beginners or the lay practitioners of yoga. It's very hard for them. Prabhuddha yogina savadhanena avadhanena saha savadhana tena savadhanena, he should practice it manasa karyam. Again, manasa means actually it's not about the mind aspect of it. Manasa, again and again, Bhagavan also says in Bhagavad Gita, by manas we are basically referring to the whole antakarana, the whole subjective machine, the machinery that we have with which we make sense of things, we judge, so you have to establish yourself. And there, this couple of things that he is mentioning, how is it possible? Why is it coming after some developments in the practice in Anavopaya that this sutra comes? Now, if you look at the commentary or the discussion which is there in Lakshman Juji, he makes a beautiful point there. He's saying it's not before you have some clear perception about your real nature. Until you have achieved that, what would you meditate on? You're not going to meditate on a picture or a particular mantra japa. These are beginning. That Vijavadhanam happens only when you know what is Vija. You know what is that Siva Sattva, what is Vimarsha Shakti. So you have some Tattva Jnana. You have not just some Tattva Jnana, but you have a fairly good amount of Tattva Jnana, and you already have sort of at least Parokshataya or Samanyena Aparokshataya. So you have some self-understanding, either direct perception, maybe Samanya Jnana. You don't have that liberating sort of awareness. You have some understanding of what is the self, what is your nature. You have some glimpse of it. Once you have done, then you have that, you realize the reality of yourself. Then you can become naturally, without much effort, you can sit and you can meditate. Okay, that is what he sort of is mentioning, that there is that netra tantra. I'll just open that and give me 1 second. Where is that page? Yeah. So we'll go to Netra Tantra. In Netra Tantra, that is also the commentary where it is mentioned, um, Naham asmi nachonyasti. I am not there, neither is anyone there. When a person will think, when he is no more looking at himself as a limited human being, nacha anyasti niravhasas tada bhavet. Savastha parama prokta. That particular state is the ultimate state. Shivasya paramatmanaha. That ultimate state. And you have to have that Shiva Vyapti. Therefore, and abhyasebhyo grahya grahaka vimarsatmakebhyo niskrantaha chid vimarshaka paramarthaha. So you have grahya grahaka vimarsatmakebhyo. So he's saying you when you do abhyasas you are doing in Anambopaya, what kind of abhyasa? So I am a jiva, this is sansara, I am looking for my Siva Bhava. I have read in the text that I am actually Shivoham, Shivoham, this I am chanting, I am meditating on it. So there is some sort of Bheda thing. Anyway, we are in Anambopaya. The sadhana, the all sadhana is for an individual who is not an Atmagyani. He is also not in the Saktopaya, where there is a mixture of Veda, mental frame, where he is also kind of oriented towards unity, even though he is recognizing there is some sort of a distinction or duality. So he's kind of in an intermediate state, at a very high middle state. In the Arnavopaya, we are talking about a very lower intermediate state where he is now graduated from a preliminary state. Then why are you mentioning all this? No, as I told you that all these are sort of mentioned. Naham asmi nachonyasti. Dheyam chatra navidyate. Dheya cha atra navidyate. There is nothing to meditate on. That means there is no dvaita pratha. There is no dvaita bhava. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya you do. And then in the meditation, there is a moment that slowly your consciousness goes to a higher plane, then the japa stops and you are in that still beautiful muse for some time. That happens when you do chanting. If you do it for 4, 5, 6, 10 days. 10 days if you do, definitely the results start happening after 10, 12 days. 15 days, of course, they will happen very frequently. So, Satavidyate Ananda Padasangleenam Manaha Samarasi Gatam. So you have that Samarasya. It is in that state of that universal unity is. And then we would go to that where he will mention, but that we will look at. Yeah. So we'll go. The next part of this Netra Tantra we'll discuss in the next verse. And there is one interesting thing that, as I was mentioning, Bijavadhanam, there is a particular interesting sloka of Vijnana Bhairava, that is verse number 134. But in one of the books that I'm consulting, it's wrongly mentioned as 137. It's 134. So it's talking about dharana, Bijavadhanam. So what is that dharana? He's explaining this is a little philosophical thing, but I want to bring it to our discussion because how to unify the mind, how to have that avadhanata, how does that work, what it means to be established in that spiritual muse, what sort of a thing is that? That is kind of hinted in that particular shloka. Jnana prakashakam sarvam sarvenatma prakashakah ekam ekasvabhavatvat jnanam jniyam vibhavyate vibhadyate. In one book it says vibhadyate, and I think vibhavyate is more correct. It's Vijnana Vairava Tantra. Jnana, you see, now just focus on this particular thing. I will go into the commentary, but that is very academic. So it's very simple. Can you be a father without having a child? You can be a potential father. A bachelor can also be a potential father. A single woman can also be a potential mother. But to be a mother, she has to have a child. Similarly, an artist can be an artist. That means he is having artistic orientation. He has the potential. He shall be called a painter when he has painted something. There has to be a painting for somebody to be referred to as a painter. We all the time we refer to Brahma or Lord Shiva is the ultimate prakashaka, swayam prakasha. There is nothing else. It's like the sun doesn't require a torchlight to light it up. It's swayam prakasha. It is self-luminous. It expresses itself. There is no creator of the creator. God doesn't have a creator. God creates everything. Now look at this whole thing. Here we are saying that he is everything. Now this is how they are in the Sivadvaita or in the Kashmiri Saivism. The imagination or the way of understanding is radically different from the Advaita Vedanta kind of thing. Advaita Vedanta, or the Vedantic thing that we do in the Upanishads and the Prakarana Granthas, this samsara is a delusional projection, and therefore, because of our ignorance, because of an absence of a clear, perfect, appropriate appreciation of the truth, that there is nothing, only Atma, we consider this samsara to be real. The phenomenal reality, we confuse this with ultimate reality. Like a normal guy who's studying physics, he is at plus two or graduation level. He doesn't know much about the modern physics, and therefore he knows, he accepts the Newtonian physics. So classical physics, he believes in classical physics. Then he gets into quantum physics and all new developments. Then he's in a topsy-turvy world, and slowly he understands how to integrate. But there is a classical physics domain where all of us are there in school. New ideas are inserted into it. You will be taught about uncertainty principle and small things. Then you go, and in masters there'll be all big theories taught to us. Similarly here, what they are trying to say is prakashaka is there. The Kashmiri Saivite is asking prakasa and prakasya, something is being illuminated. That is all samsara. Advaita Vedanta says there is nothing called prakasya. Prakasya, prakasaka bheda is not real. There is no God because of which tameva bhantam anuvadi sarvam. Vedanta says, Upanishad says, fine. But everything, this is just kind of upachara, Aupacharika buddhitaya. With this kind of a buddhi, we are explaining, because there's no other way we can make understanding of who we are, what sadhana we are doing, why are we doing satsang. Everything will become vacuum, will become very difficult for us to understand anything. Therefore, we say Bhagavan is the source of everything. He is giving us papa punya phala. These are all fine. But at a stage of development of our spirituality, that is what Advaita Vedantists will say, ultimately all these are not relevant at all. All these Newtonian physics not relevant when you're talking about the black hole, because you're going to a different domain altogether. You require different kind of mathematical models to deal with that sort of reality. Similarly, they will say that only Brahman is Satya, because that is Advaita Vedanta. Advaita means no Dvaita, there is non-dualism. There is nothing else but Brahman, that alone is real. Rest of it, appearances. Here they are saying, look here, because here they're dealing with how we can make use of our dual consciousness, the duality which surrounds us. How can we make use of it to establish ourselves in non-duality? That is why Kashmiri Saivism is very useful for sadhana, for meditation, because Advaita Vedanta is the perfect truth. It gives you the ultimate picture of the truth, but doesn't give us a very quick handle as to how to do the meditation, how to reach there. They will say Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, these are all fine. But the Kashmiri Saivism thing is very useful because it's giving you a very useful handle. It deals with the know-how aspect of the sadhana. Therefore, this sutra is very important. I'm mentioning Jnana Prakashakam Sarvam Sarvenatma Prakashakaha. Now, look how they are saying that in order to unify everything, you don't have to deny duality like a Vedantist. You don't have to do. Why do you have to deny? I will tell you how to unify. Without denying samsara to be false, to be completely illusory, I'll give you a way in which you can still unify your consciousness. from this particular verse in Vijnana Bhairava. What does he say? Jnana prakashakam sarvam sarven atma prakashakaha. So this particular jnana, there is something which sort of illuminates everything. Now, can we say that it is an illuminator if there is nothing which is illuminated? Sunlight. You realize sunlight is bright only when there is a reflector on which the sunlight reflects, and you have experienced it when you are doing those international flights, and it's very dark outside. In early morning, you see the sun falls, and it's very, very cold outside, isn't it? Maybe minus 40 degrees. But then that sunlight falls. And then if you're sitting on the side of the window, the sunlight falls on you, you feel a little warm, you feel good, right? Without a reflector, sun has no light. Otherwise, it will be all bright. The space, no, the space is not very bright. It's all dark because there is no reflector. So only if there is a planet or there's a satellite, there has to be some object on which the light falls and there's a reflection, and then some heat happens. Similarly, Jnana Prakashakam Sarvam Sarvena Atma Prakashaka. This Atma, which is showing Prakasha, it's because of the Prakashyamana Sansara, or the objects, that it illuminates, that we call it the luminous self, luminous illuminator. Sarvena Atma Prakashaka Ekam Eka Swarupatvat Swabhavatvat Jnanam Jnayam Vibhavyate. So jnana and jnana. Jnana is what you want to know. Jnana is what is the product, what you know, the whole thing. Now the jnana, jnata, and jnaya. If you look at it, jnana cannot exist without any jnaya vastu. If there is nothing to be known, there is no knowledge. Look at it, it's beautiful. There is no word called knowledge if there is nothing to be known. If there is something to be known, then there is something called knowledge. And if there is something called knowledge, then you can imagine there is a knower. For Advaita Vedanta, Satchidananda Brahma, Satyam Jnanam Anandam Brahma, when they say, they are not using these as independent adjectives of Brahman. They are saying that when we say that Brahman is Jnana Swarupa, we are talking about that awareness, that luminous consciousness in which there is no duality of subject and object. So they are talking about a perfect thing. Here they are saying that jnanam jnayam vibhavyate. Without jnana there is no jnaya, there is no jnana. Without jnana there is no jnata. Now come to that whole unifying business that we want to meditate on. What beautifully is being hinted here is that because of this whole sansara we see around, is it different from sansara jnana that we are having? And this sansara jnana is possible because there is a prakashaka, which is that Shiva Tattva, that is that Atma Tattva. So by the help of this whole sansara alone, that Atma or that Lord Paramashiva is Godhead. What do you mean by Godhead? Because we follow him. Because he's protecting us. There are people to be protected by him. Therefore, he is the universal protector or the universal destroyer. There are things to be destroyed. Only so in that sense, there is a relative, there's a relative aspect to that supreme luminous consciousness. Relative to us, it's Prakashaka. Relative to that Prakashaka, we are Prakashya. So there is a kind of an integral relationship. It's very intricate. Now, unification. How do you do in unification? He's being very beautiful. Sarvam prakasyam vedyam vastu jatam jnana prakasakam asti. And he's saying, iti jnana padasya kartri prayogena kritya lyuto bahulam. So there is a particular Panini Sutra. He's saying, prakasaka yasya tadeva evam vidham vedaka prakashyam vedyam ityarthaha. Vedaka is the person, the prakashyam. Vedyam. So this one which will be known. Vedaka sadhyam, vedyatvam muktva. That Vedaka sadhyam, that what is that Vedaka? He will know. The knower will know this, that Vedyatva. Ukta Vedya Sadhyam Vedakatvam. And then, as a result of that particular Vedya, there is a Vedaka. Vedaka is dependent on Vedya, and Vedya is dependent on the Vedaka. There is a kind of interrelationship that is hinting at. Sarvena Atma iti. Sarvena Vedya Jatena Atma Vedaka Prakasakari Bhavati. Because there is a samsara, this Atma, it gives expression to them, gives them consciousness. As a consciousness, they gain that thing. A cat becomes a cat because we observe, because of the observer, the cat. But the observer gets a chance to be observer because there is a cat. You look at this whole argument. It might certainly think, you might say that, yeah, it's a kind of circular kind of thing, but it's very interesting argument. I'm saying this whole samsara exists only because there's an observer. And then you're saying that even observer to exist, there should be something to be observed. Something has to be observed. Then only the word observer will make any sense. Therefore, he's saying, Sarvena Vedya Jatena Atma Vedakaha Prakasakari Bhavati. Vedyam Rite. If there is no Vedya, Kim Apekhyam Vedakatvam Vedakasya. वेदक का जो वेदकत्व है वो कैसे सिद्ध हो पाएगा बिना वेद्य का रहते हुए? That is the question. Very powerful question. Therefore, he's saying वेदक इति कस्य वेदक इत्यर्थ. The moment you use the word वेदक, अच्छा ठीक समझता है, क्या समझता है, जानता है, किसको जानता है? That kind of a question. What does he know? What does he understand? अतः वेद्यमेव जीवितं ददाति वेदकस्य इति विभावनीयम. So there is a vedya vedaka interrelationship is mentioning. The illuminator and the illuminated, they both are interlinked. Ekam eva swabhavatvat. They both are not different. This whole Parama Shivatva is kind of manifesting as Vedya and Vedaka. This division is for the benefit of a cognitive effort we are doing. Whereas that Shiva, there is nothing which is not Shiva. So the Vedaka, the Vedya, and this whole process of knowing, these are all manifestations of the Parama Shakti, of the Parama Shiva. And that is how the duality, we're going to make use of it in order to pacify, reintegrate, and establish our consciousness in a state of non-dual equanimity. So, Bijavadhanam, so Bija Sabda. And Tena, by using that word Bija, then that Shakti thing, there is, so far the meditative practice, the effort is required. Some sort of a dualism is kind of presumed and accepted. It's condored. Because otherwise, how will you do meditation? But in the next verse, you will find that quickly the sadhaka graduates to a state of complete non-dualism. Absolutely, there is. Ata vedyam eva jivitam dadati, that we have done. Evam eka swabhavatvad vedyatvam vedaka vedakatva swarupam vedakatvam cha vedya swarupam iti एक प्रकृतिकत्वात् ज्ञानम वेदकम ज्ञेयम च एकमेव तत्त्वमिति विशेषण भावयेत्. Now how do you meditate? Jnanam vedakam ज्ञेयम. Jnaya and jnana and jnata. All this is one thing only. Ekameva tattvam visheshena bhavayeत् prakasakam jnanam na atmanah prithak. That jnana is no different from atma. सर्वशब्दवाच्यम ज्ञेयजातम ज्ञानात् न पृथग इति ऐक्यम भावयति भावः अथवा न किमपि प्रकाशात् व्यतिरिक्तं भाति वर्तते वा इति सर्वं चिन्मयम् एव विभाव्य यद् ज्ञानं तदेव ज्ञेयात् इति तत्त्वज्ञाननिष्ठः संभवति इति भावः. So there is a beautiful, this is the Vijnana Bhairava Tantra, and the very powerful. If possible, after this, we can do that text. It's a beautiful text. So, end of the day, what I was trying to hint at was that Lakshmanji sort of clarifies one thing, that once you have some tattva jnana, some basic thing, and then you can meditate deeply and you can establish yourself in that ultimate thing, that bijam, bijavadhanam, that you have to do again and again, should not relax. Now, if you actually do that Vijavadhanam, what happens? That is clarified in the verse number 16. We'll see how much we can do. We have still 10 minutes, so we may be able to do it. Asanastaha sukham hrade nimajjati. Asanastaha. So this asana sabda is not physical asana, that will be refuted. So asanastaha means when you are established in that asanastaha, sukham, stiram, sukham, asanam. That is what Patanjali said in the while explaining what is asana. Stiram, that means anga mejotva, all these weaknesses we have, some kind of a trepidation, some movement in the body and the mind. That should not be there. Stiram, sukham, asanam. This is a beautiful commentary on that. We have sort of tossed up on that when we were dealing this sixth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita and the Madhusudanitika. Asanastaha, that means when he is established in that state of equanimity. This asana, we have to understand not in a Patanjali way. Patanjali also, that physical posture, the Hatha Yoga, is only instrumental. Some people make Hatha Yoga an end in itself because it's a health program. You want to remain slim, you want to remain beautiful and strong, so therefore you will do a lot of asanas. A lot of women are sort of advised to do a few asanas after a childbirth to regain their youth and their slim body and all that they do. But no, that's not the purpose of Patanjali. He was also mentioning all these of having instrumental value for a state of non-dual established, that consciousness will be established in that non-dual state. Here, however, the asana sabda has to be understood with a reference to the previous sutra, which is Bijavadhanam. That Bijavadhana, if you refer to as asana, then if you are established there, asanastaha, sukham means anayasena, without much effort. Sahajataya, anayasena, without doing much effort. Rade, what is that rada? Rada, you will mention that particular state, that ocean of blissful unified consciousness. In that ocean of pure consciousness, nimajjati, he is dissolved there. Now, the moment you say something get dissolved, that means it existed in some form earlier. So the sutra says Hrade Nimajjati, that means Bijavadhanam, in that stage, there was definitely effort made to unify the consciousness. So the Jnata and the Jnaya and the Jnana, all these were being understood, seen, practiced, and then unified through Vichara. That Vicharatmaka Asana, Vijavadhanam, here if you stay there forcefully without interruption, without any kind of disturbance, without any kind of distraction, then you can ultimately get dissolved in the that oceanic consciousness of complete unified consciousness of Shivahood. That is what is kind of being hinted here. Okay. Now let's look at the some of the commentaries and we'll go. So what is the main thing? Evamisati aso yogi asyate. First, let's look at the vritti. Asyate nekam nityam ekatmena. Nityam. That means nityam means chirakalam, for a long time. It's not for a couple of days or a weeks or something like that. So asyate, a person stays, establishes himself for a long time. Ekatmiyena, with full focus. Sthiyate asmin iti param shaktam balam. So when he has a lot of the sakta power, he's at that vijavadhanam, he is meditating on this. Yaha tatra tishtati, the sadhaka who exists there, parihrita parapara dhyana dharanadi sarva kriya prayaso. Parihrita. Parihrita means he has done parihara, he has withdrawn, he has completed the course, examinations given. He has passed with a good distinction. Parihrita, parapara, para and apara dhyana. Intermediate and the highest level of non-dual, sapragyata, asampragyata, this, savitarka, nirvitarka, savichara, nirvichara, all that he has completed all this. Nirudha samadhi is established. Dhyana dharanadi sarva kriya prayasha, pranayama, and all that. He has done all that. Then what? Nityam antarmukhataya. He's, remember, in Shiva Sutra, we will go into that, and that is beautifully discussed also by Lakshman Joshi. See, here the asana is not a physical posture. Physical posture is Hatha Yoga and all, but for preliminary people. They have their own relevance and benefit. They have a great contribution to the blood circulation and the intelligence of the mind and how you are active and all. Great. nothing to deny. Any credit to those practices. But here in Shiva Sutra, asana is not a state of body, it's a state of your consciousness. Remember Khechari Mudra in the Saktopaya, we discussed that no, it's not about twisting your tongue and putting it so that there's some droplets of that particular fluid which comes and it tastes sweet. No, it's not about that. Khecharatiti Khechari. Khechari Mudra is not that twisting of the tongue inside your mouth. It's about staying in that state of Shiva consciousness, that expansive consciousness. So here, like for example, you remember when we did that Aparokya Anubhuti of Shankaracharya, he says, yeah, all these are different angas of the Yoga Sutras that we will discuss, but here, that Brahmakara Vritti holds the key to understanding, unraveling the mysticism associated with all the yogic terminologies. So he sort of reinterprets every word that we have studied, like sama, dhamma, titikya. Each one he twists and then he explains what it means in Advaita Vedanta. Very similar here, asana is not a physical posture. It's about modulation of the consciousness at a very high plane where there is no distraction and which is all the time linked and established on that premise of non-dual Shiva consciousness. That is what he's mentioning. Parita sarva kriya prayaso nityam antaramukhataya tadeva paramrishati. That is what is being established. Sa sukham anayasataya. Sukham means without any effort. Paramrita samriddhi, para amrita samudra. So that is the ultimate blissful nectar, full of nectar. What is that? Because that enlightenment, nimajjati, gets dissolved. Dehadi sankocha sanghara brodhanena. Dehadi sanskara and sankocha. All these. Sankocha sanghara. So all these, you see, the body consciousness, association, all kinds of tadatmya buddhi. When you flush them away from your consciousness, you completely abandon them, discard them. Tanmai bhavati. Tanmai means that Shivamai bhavati. So we couldn't do the commentary, but we will be doing the commentary when we meet next on Saturday, and we will carry forward this discussion. So we have a couple of minutes if you have any questions, or we can do the Santi mantras, and we'll move forward. Any questions or any doubts? Okay. Then we can do the Santi mantras. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Tat Sat. Okay, see you tomorrow on Saturday.